All right, we'll move forward then. We have our presentation, Space Needs Project Update, and we'll start with Sue Quambach. Thank you.
Good afternoon. Sue Quambach, Director of Central Services, here to talk to you about a potential city administrative office building. As you will recall, we came in April and did a presentation for you on this same topic. We were planning to give you an update in a couple of weeks, but Councilor Anderson Jr. asked us if we could come a little bit earlier, and so we're here today to give you an update on this. What we're going to cover today includes the following: a little bit of space needs history. We're going to identify the problems that we're facing today, recommended solution and benefits of that recommended solution, funding plan, project concerns, and next steps. This is not a new topic. This discussion has been going on for 8 or 9 years minimum. Space needs study was conducted by the prior administration in 2007, and as a result of that, they considered purchase and renovation of a lot of different buildings: the Midland National Life, First Dakota National Bank, this old CNA building, 10th and Main office building, and the Dakota Lofts lot. So a lot was vetted through in 2008, 2009. In 2012, this administration also did a formal space needs study, and we implemented some short-term fixes. We are leasing a building in 100 South Dakota Avenue building. We had to move a couple of our smaller departments out of City Hall and across the street to this leased space. We have been working on maximizing the square feet as best we can within City Hall. We did ground floor renovation last year, and we're finishing up second floor renovation this year. And I have personally been involved in vetting over 20 locations in the last 2 to 3 years. So we have been doing our due diligence to look at all possibilities. This slide shows you that if we continue at the current pace of growth in terms of population and city staff growth, we're going to need an additional 573 city employees over the next 25 years, albeit many of those will be public safety employees, police and fire, and staff to install and maintain our infrastructure for streets, sewers, our buildings, etc. But certainly not all of them would be out and about. Many of them are going to be office workers. And so we're going to have a continued need there for additional office space. And we also need to provide good customer service to the public within our city buildings. So you might remember, you're somewhat familiar with this slide. This is showing the number of employees based on 71 city employees needed per 10,000 population. The problem is quite simply that we're out of space. We've maximized space in City Hall, but we still haven't improved working space for all of our staff, and the teams are still split up. This is a picture of basement office area. It is the lowest level of City Hall. This is below ground floor in City Hall. And there are still 7 employees, engineers, that work out of this area that they affectionately, or maybe not so affectionately, call the swamp. We opened up second floor, as you know, by tearing down all the drywall that we could. It's now an open office concept. There's only 2 offices up there. Everything else is open office, cubicle space. But even with that effort, engineering will still be in at least 2 locations in City Hall, and Public Works admin is in a 3rd location in City Hall. And they have no growth space. We now will have 44 employees working on second floor, but we still don't have enough space up there to move the people out of the basement. And as I said before, we had to move some smaller departments out of City Hall altogether because there's no room for them there. We have next to no future growth space in City Hall. We have 1 empty workspace on second floor in the HR area. We have 5 future growth workstation space on ground floor. And if we don't begin the process of building another building soon, we're going to be forced to lease even more space as we need to continue to hire new employees. So, as I said, we've vetted through all kinds of other options in terms of looking at existing buildings to see if there's a possibility to buy an existing building. And we have arrived at the decision, our recommended solution is to build a new city services building. We want to continue, we've made tremendous improvements to City Hall, but there is a finite number of square feet there. This is a picture of the new permit counter on ground floor, which is a great improvement. The old counter space used to have a sign hung on the door that said, "Please open door slowly," because you'd knock into people standing on the other side of it. That's how. It's wonderful we've been able to maximize the space that we have. So we'll continue to finalize the improvements to City Hall, and then our next steps would be to vacate and repurpose 3 buildings in anticipation of a new city services building that would be in addition to City Hall. So this is a concept sketch only, but a steering committee looking into the city's space needs recommends that the new city services building be built north of the 8th and Dakota ramp. It is viewed as the most desirable option and location. The location is great. It's close to the downtown city government campus. It's adjacent to an existing public parking ramp. It's kitty corner to a park, and it's close to Minnehaha County government campus. I think we all agree leasing is not a good long-term option. We already own the land, so that's a definite plus. And costs are only going to go up. And as we strive to improve departmental collaboration and the quality of the employee workspace, this is the right thing to do for our staff, and it's important for future recruitment and retention of those employees. So the goal is to centralize the high customer service departments, such as parks and utility billing, in the downtown city government campus for a better customer experience for the public. This slide is showing you the 2 buildings that would be sold or repurposed and the staff that would potentially move to the new location. We'd also be able to discontinue our lease at the 100 South Dakota Avenue building and move those folks back to City Hall. So this is an aerial view of the downtown campus. It includes city and county buildings. So to the north, we have our law enforcement center, which is a city building. We have our public safety building and jail, which is a county building, county admin building, the courthouse. We have the Siouxland Health and Human Services building, and that one is owned by the county, but the city leases some space out of there for the health department. The main library is item 7 there. We have our City Hall Annex, City Hall, Carnegie Town Hall, and the space that we're talking about is smack dab in the middle of it all. Our intent would be to install clear, consistent signage like you would see on a hospital or university campus. And now I'm going to turn it over to Tracy Turbach to discuss funding and budget considerations.
Thank you, Sue. Tracy Turbach with the Finance Office again. I think Sue's done really an excellent job of recapping kind of where we've been, how we see the history of this problem going back into the Munson administration, if not further back in time. So it's not a new problem for the city. It's something that the city leaders have been wrestling with for some time. And plain and simple, as Sue said, the problem is that City Hall's out of space. We're just maxed out at City Hall. We're now, as you folks know, into the mode of leasing office space. We do have teams that are fragmented, as Sue described, and there's simply no room for growth. That's not a good position for the city to be in if we're going to be an effective, well-run organization. And the solution, as she recapped, I think, on so many fronts and so many levels makes just great sense. We already own the land, so there's no investment in land. This will centralize our teams to improve collaboration and efficiencies, and as well centralize some of our customer service points. One of my favorite benefits of this is that we can quit spending money on leasing and start investing in the city's own asset. And as Sue described, the government campus concept, this would just build upon what we have already got going here in the downtown area with the government concept or government campus concept. And last, certainly not least, is the benefit to our own city staff and improvements made to their working conditions. So with that, let me talk about funding. And some of the things I want to talk about have to do with concerns that we've heard since April when we first started talking about this particular project. Funding has not been one of those that I've heard concerns about, but it is critical, of course, with any project. So I do want to talk about it again just to make sure everybody is understanding just what we're proposing and how this is expected to unfold. The project would be funded by selling sales tax bonds. The amount of bonds to be sold would be determined once we complete a schematic design process. So that's one of the first steps to really determine how much money we would need to raise from a bond sale. We'd have to determine what is the concept, what is the schematic design for this property, what will the building look like, and most importantly, from a financial standpoint, how much will it cost? And so that schematic design services effort that will involve an architect and a construction manager for pre-construction services is funded within the 2015 budget. And as you folks know, the debt service payments have been reflected in the CIP that's been proposed and that you'll vote on later tonight. So we don't have cost estimates now. That's something we, of course, all want to know. What would the project cost? But that's really something to determine a reliable number, actionable number. We really need to complete that schematic design phase before we make a final decision and understand what the costs will be. The discussion about Van Epps Park has been one that we've heard comments and concerns and questions about in terms of how this improvements to the Van Epps Park piece fits in with the rest of the building project. The current proposal within the capital improvement program, again, that you'll vote on tonight, includes $85,000 in 2016. That would be intended for design of the park improvements, and $471,000 in 2017 that would then be provided for construction of the park improvements. And the intention is really to have that park completed and enhanced so that when the building is finished and open that it's available for use. There have been questions, as I say, about the timing of it, certainly legitimate questions. The estimated cost has been questioned, and maybe most importantly from your perspective, I think just a question about whether or not there's a higher priority for those dollars in 2016 and 2017 that are in the capital plan. So with those questions in mind, we've developed some other possible alternatives for you folks to consider in terms of the improvements to Van Epps Park. Number one, of course, is the proposal that we've got on the table in terms of the recommended CIP. But the second alternative for you to think about and consider would be to, if we do ultimately sell bonds for the building project, that we could incorporate into that bond sale enough dollars to complete the improvements to Van Epps Park. So that's another, I think, perfectly acceptable, very viable means of financing those improvements that would not involve utilizing sales tax dollars from our capital improvement plan as they are currently proposed. One advantage of that would be from a project management standpoint and management of an overall project, having all those dollars for the building and the park in one bucket would certainly help coordination of that. The budgeting, the contracts could be streamlined, I think, and simplified. So there's certainly some attractive aspects to incorporating the cost of those improvements into a bond issue if we do have one, in fact, for the building. Item 3 would be to phase in improvements, or alternative 3, phase in the improvements over time. Certainly we do that in a lot of cases where we break a project up into logical pieces and do one piece at a time so that it doesn't mean as many dollars in any one given year. So that's certainly an alternative if we wanted to break that up into pieces, although there is a limit to how far I think that it's prudent to do that with projects. Certainly the smaller pieces, the more pieces you have, the less cost effective I think we are with spending those dollars. It's you have mobilization on projects and so forth, so there's certainly a limit to how far you might want to go with phasing them in, but that's again I think another alternative you folks may want to consider. And as with any project, there's always the alternative of not doing it at all. So the project or the park as it currently exists today could be left alone. We could do nothing and leave the park in its current state. So those are some options for the council to consider as it relates to the Van Epps Park improvements that have been proposed. Clearly you folks hold the purse strings, so you get to decide whether or not dollars get appropriated for those improvements, and if so, how under one of these or maybe some other alternative that we haven't identified, you might want to proceed with those improvements. Again, the council clearly is in the driver's seat on that. Next item I wanted to address was the county collaboration. This project, I think when we first talked to you folks in April about this specific project, there was a lot of excitement about the possibility of the county participating as a full partner in the project. And of course at that point, discussions with the county had just recently begun on that topic and really hadn't been delved into very deeply. Now I think we do clearly understand that the county has bigger fish to fry, so to speak. They have some very challenging priorities that they must address, understandably, first before they talk about investing dollars in office space and namely their jail space needs is, I think, at or very near the top of their priority list for their facility needs. With that said, the project team isn't ready to give up or throw out the idea of county participation in the project in some way, shape, or form. I think there are some, and will continue to be some opportunities for county participation, even if it is not as a full partner on the project. The plan and the intention would be moving ahead with a building that we would plan to build for more than what's simply needed today. That seems only prudent given the history of growth here and the expectation for that growth in Sioux Falls to continue. We clearly want to build this building for the future and to meet future needs as well. So with that said, we do expect to build more than we need and have additional space that will not be needed by the city on day one. Those are spaces that could be an opportunity for the county to participate or become an occupant in the building at some point once they've solved their jail space needs. And this could certainly be a very good interim step perhaps for the county in solving their long-term office space needs. In addition to that, and maybe more importantly, more relevant to the long term certainly, moving ahead with this project as it's proposed does not rule out future collaboration with the county on a longer term solution. The building will be designed with maximum flexibility in mind. Sue talked about how the second floor in City Hall has been opened up, a lot of the walls taken down, so there's a great deal of flexibility as to how it can be configured, what kind of use that space is put to, and that would certainly be a theme and a philosophy that would be carried through with this new building as well, to maintain maximum flexibility in terms of how the space is used. Perhaps more important is the concept of designing it with the idea of future expansion in mind. And I don't know today what that would be, if that would mean designing it so that more floors could be added if perhaps it's situated on the property in such a way that another building could also be located there at some point in the future. But I think that's key to the long-term success and to maximize the utilization of that space, is that we do plan for future expansion, and certainly that opens the door wide open at some point in the future for the county to collaborate with the city on either an addition to this existing building or perhaps another space on that same site. This is very, very likely will not be the last building the city ever builds, so I think the future opportunity for full county participation and partnership in the future certainly exists regardless. Moving on now to project milestones and some of the next steps as we see it with this project. Over the summer, this past summer, architect proposals have been solicited and received. We've completed the selection process, and a contract with an architect is currently being negotiated. The proposals for construction manager have been advertised and have been received. We haven't started the screening or selection process yet for the construction manager contract, but that will begin very soon. So that's kind of the status of where we are today, but I want to reassure you that we're not making assumptions that the project is a done deal. There's not an assumption here that this is simply going to be rubber stamped. We understand certainly that the council has the final say on whether this project moves forward. We are quickly approaching, I think, the next decision point or the next gate, as I've said it before, in the process where the council will decide if we go to the next step, if we will take that next step. And we expect that to happen fairly soon. That would be bringing the final negotiated architectural contract to you for consideration. That could happen as early as next month to seek your approval. And again, that's key to completing that schematic design phase. And the construction manager contract, very likely, if the architectural contract is approved in October, then the construction manager contract would follow either late October or early November, I would expect. Again, council approval of these contracts would not and does not represent final approval for the project or the building to be built. It really simply takes us to the next step where we can answer some of those fundamental and very critical questions to provide you with the information that you need to make a well-informed decision. Again, that key information we can really only answer with completion of that schematic design phase, and that would be phase one of what would be the proposed architectural contract that comes forward, we expect next month. We also talked about, in a number of projects that we've done, we've had citizen committees, with the Event Center, with the Aquatic Center. This project really doesn't lend itself so much to having citizen input, but we do think stakeholder input is important. Clearly, those departments that we would expect to be located there would have a lot of input into the process, and we would certainly hope the council would have an opportunity to provide input to the architect as well in terms of, from your perspective, what you see as important in this project. So that would be incorporated into the schematic design part of the process once an architect is on board. Looking further ahead then, a little bit further, if we do gain your approval on the architectural and construction manager, kind of taking that first step, getting through that first gate to begin schematic design, we would expect that would be completed first quarter of next year. And so that schematic design then again would really answer those, what I think of as the two basic questions we have to have answers to before we can make an informed decision about whether or not we move ahead with this project. Number one, what does it look like? How big is it? How many square feet is it? Is it 2 stories? Is it 3? Where does it sit on the property? Is it going to be connected to the parking ramp? Won't it be? How does it relate to the park there? There are just a lot of those things that can and will be determined through that schematic design process. And those are things you folks should really understand, I would think, if I were in your position, before you would make a decision to say yes or no, we're going to go ahead with this or we're not. So that's one key aspect of what we will learn in that schematic design process. The second key thing is what will it cost? I don't think we will, any of us ever proceed with a project without having some idea of what it's going to cost, and the best way to get the most reliable number is to complete that schematic design process. Get the architect on board, a construction manager to provide those pre-construction services that will answer those two basic questions: what does it look like and what will it cost? Only then would we come to the council with a request to move forward with the project, if that's kind of the conclusion that the schematic design process leads us to. And so it would be first quarter of next year that process would be completed, the schematic design work would be done, we'd have a good reliable cost estimate, and we'd come to the council and seek your authorization to proceed with the project if we felt that was the appropriate thing to do, and then as part of that decision to proceed with the project, of course, to issue the bonds to fund the project. So those are two really key decision points. Again, the one coming up here this fall to determine whether or not you want to proceed with the schematic design process. And if the answer to that question is yes, well, over the next several months, that process would be completed, and then first quarter of next year, we'd come back with the results of that schematic design, tell you what it's going to look like and what it will cost, and get your authorization or seek your authorization to move forward with the project. So again, just to reinforce that's the process. There's some key decision points and gates, and you folks really, again, are in the driver's seat in terms of determining whether this project is going to move forward. So with that, I know both Sue and I are here, as well as some of the other team members, to answer any questions you folks might have. Thank you.
Thank you, Council Chair. First of all, the construction manager at risk, I'm fully supportive of that, and if you do any research on a construction manager at risk, the time to have them is when you're doing the design, and they're there to help us so that the costs of the project stay within reason. So I supported that when we first started this process, and I will continue to support that. I do have questions on a couple of things and concerns I just want to bring out. The county's going to be starting, as you said, their own project, and one of them is the jail. As soon as they start that project, they're going to lose a lot of parking, and they're relying on the city right now for that parking in the very spot we're talking about building a building, and we'd be taking away more parking downtown if we construct there. I don't like the location, okay? My own personal choice, and I'm not a designer or architect, but I do wonder, when you look at the property at the corner of 8th and Minnesota, it's 2 pieces long, the city doesn't own it, and in the whole scope of things, the land is probably one of the cheaper aspects of a project like this. I'm kind of winding around here, but I'll make a point. One of the reasons why we were talking about Van Epps Park is to improve the main roadway into Sioux Falls from the north. We want to improve it. It's not very impressive right now. Well, that corner on 8th and Minnesota, I'd have to say, is not very impressive overall either. If the city bought that project or that land, and it's about the same size if you look at a map as the parking lot we're looking at, we could really do a lot with that corner and that whole location. We could tie a building into the parking ramp. We could have a city building on the corner of Minnesota and 8th instead of tucked on the bottom of the hill in an area that, let's face it, there's businesses and such down there that are less than desirable for where I'd want to put a brand new city building. Have we looked at buying that land at 8th and Minnesota? Is it for sale? I imagine it is. Can you talk about any of that, Tracy?
I can certainly start a response, and I know Sue has been kind of leading the effort to for the last couple of years to cull through and evaluate. I think she mentioned she has looked at 20 or more different sites or possibilities, and that was one of them. There is a developer there that owns that is planning to develop it into a building. They were interested in the city being a tenant in that property. Certainly, I think from my experience, any property is for sale if you offer the right price. My recollection is that the price being asked was quite high. One of the I think perceived downsides of the city locating there is that it prevents a commercial enterprise from locating on that corner, and it certainly, I think from a lot of people's perspective, it would make more sense for commercial uses on Minnesota versus government uses. It just seems like that would be a higher, better use of that real estate than to put a city facility on that corner. It's a very, as you know, highly traveled street, certainly an ideal for some commercial development at some point. I know there's a sign up there now about Mr. Hansen's, the owner of that property, his plans to develop that. But yeah, we've had a number of conversations. I don't know how far into the details you want to get. Sue can certainly share kind of her experience with that particular piece of property if you'd like.
So while you're coming up, a commercial development on that property right next to a city park, there are limited uses to it. I mean, it would require a conditional use permit adjacent to a city park, so the uses for a commercial building on that corner probably are somewhat limited. So just kind of an observation or a comment from my perspective. Sue, welcome.
It is a rather large parcel of land. The owner purchased, I think it was 4 or 5 parcels that were adjacent to one another over time, and hence now has that whole area. The building planned there would be very large and have multiple tenants. They were certainly interested and approached us to be a primary tenant in that building, but we certainly would not be alone in that building. There are other interested tenants. I've seen schematic designs, certainly these aren't finalized, that have a 5 or 6 story building there with potentially 140 to 160,000 square feet of space for multiple tenants.
Excuse me.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have to disagree with Councilor Karski. I kind of like the location. I like that campus feel of, kind of government from one end to the other of that street. So I'm kind of in favor of that. I did also like Councilor Rolfing's idea of putting it on the parking ramp between where City Hall is now and where the annex is now, but I got that one poo-pooed too, just like he did. So that was, you got to keep bringing it up, right? I guess just a couple of things for me that I really wanted to highlight. And I've said this before. Number one, I think we do need to build a building that it's ridiculous to continue to pay somebody else for rent and all of that stuff, that we need to own our own building. 2, I understand Public Works needing to be an all-in-one location, and that's really critical at this point. If this city's going to grow at the level that it is, those teams need to be able to work together. They need to be able to see each other across the aisle. They need to be able to collaborate in the same space and not have to plan or Skype or whatever. It's really critical that we get those folks together. Then the last piece for me really is that long-term plan. And I think that we have to be really smart about this building needs to be, it's not for the next 10 years or the next 20 years. This isn't 50 or 100-year building, and it needs to be expandable. It's not made of rubber, but it's going to go up and it's going to go out, or it's going to do something, right? So those are the pieces for me that I'll continue to say that we heard about this in a funky way as City Council. We weren't really appreciative of that, but the communication since that time has been top-notch, and I think that our understanding of this project is far clearer, and I think this is the right place to go, the right way to do it, and I think that we're on the right path.
Councilor Rolfing?
One quick question, Sue. The parking ramp on 8th and Minnesota, or 8th and
8th
Dakota?
and Dakota. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Is that expandable? Did we build that so we can put levels on top of it?
Yes, we did check into that, and the footings are such that it can support another story. So I think we'd get about another 80 parking spaces out of that.
Okay, thank you.
Councilor Kiley?
Well, I don't think that it's a secret that I'm a proponent of this particular project. Number one, I'm anti-leasing or anti-rent. Have been that way in my own private life, and I would continue with that philosophy even here assisting in management of city government. Money spent on leasing just never comes back, and you don't have an asset to show for it. I am very pro-employee as well, too. And when we have employees that are scattered around different buildings within the same department, it's just not very conducive to a good, positive work environment. Trying to address that so that we can provide that good work environment. It promotes well-being, collaboration, in which I think that also equates then and leads to better service to our citizens, which ultimately that what we are trying to provide here as well. And I'd just like to emphasize some of the things that you had pointed out previously. I mean, everything that we've done so far is basically short-term fixes. I mean, leasing, and we've already addressed the pitfalls to leasing, associated with leasing. And then maximizing City Hall. We have, despite our best efforts, we are still just bursting at the seams, and we still need space. And it's very obvious, at least to this counselor, that we are going to need additional space. And to put it off is just going to exacerbate the problems that we already have, that already exist, and the cost of building is just going to escalate. So I think we're putting off the inevitable if we do that. And then just the chart, staying ahead of growth. I mean, by 2040, a projection of 70,000 additional citizens in the city of Sioux Falls, equating to an additional 573 city employees. I mean, we do have to house them someplace, and even though that to some that might seem like that's a long way off. Imagine if our forefathers had not considered building a city hall and we were leasing space all around the city, where we would be at today without their foresight. So I'm very much in favor of this for a number of different reasons. And I would encourage all of the, and I think that, again, the communication has greatly improved, and I will take the blame for some of that as well, because I've been on the Space Needs project, and quite frankly, it is difficult because the rules that we have to operate under are difficult for us to get together and to communicate. Even on tonight's budget issues, it's difficult to get together as a group to communicate. So anyway, it's, and the estimates will be available. I know that there was concern about that, and the estimates will be available before final decisions by this council are made. So I thank you for your efforts to overbuild and to look to the future and future expansion. I think this is just a plus for the citizens and for our city employees.
Councilor Jameson.
Sue, we spent some time on the phone the other day talking about this. I appreciate that call from you to try to get some questions answered from me. And we reviewed a lot of those, and you've covered a lot of them in your new presentation, and I guess that's good. The other question, though, that we talked about, an item that's kind of not really been brought up except just subtly, is the adult use building down the street. It's a one-way street. Everybody coming in is going to go past it. Everybody goes to the library, generally goes past it. What is your take on that? How do you feel about building probably what would be, I would sense, a substantial investment next to that? What are your thoughts, or what are your feelings?
Well, my hope is that by building, first of all, it may just curb business at that location. I don't know. The other thought is that having more buildings surrounding it and will spur further development from others. So that would be the hope there too, that if we build this beautiful building next door to it, that would help spur additional development in the area.
Did you do that? No, I didn't. April Fool's Day here. So the other part that we did discuss was the math of it all, and the idea that those other buildings, other locations, like we did back in 08 and 09, we evaluated all the inventory of the city, and we were going to trade off and sell all these other buildings to help fund a new building. And we had the math worked out that it was going to take a couple $1 million to do it. The economy went south and a lot of things changed and we just didn't do anything. Have you done the math?
Well, the thing is that we really don't want to abandon City Hall. We have put substantial investment into it over the last 5 years, replacing the HVAC system, the elevator, finishing sprinkling within each floor of the building. It's a treasure to the city. It's 80 years old, but it's a good, sturdy building. We've invested in tuck pointing. We're just finishing the last side. We've done one per year over the last 4 years. And we really have no intention of abandoning City Hall. But what we want to do is have an additional space for office workers and, again, for the future growth. Now, utility billing is an option in terms of if those folks end up moving to this new location, potentially we could sell that. That's an option, or we might decide, since it's so close to the new event center in that complex, we might decide to repurpose it for something else that SMG might see a need for, or simply for storage, things to do with the event center complex. So that remains to be seen. And then in terms of the Parks admin building, that's at 6th and, is it?
Phillips.
6th and Phillips, thank you. That's, it's possible that we might choose to sell that building. It's also possible that we might choose to repurpose it. There's a lot of activity that might happen there in terms of Levitt Pavilion and other discussions that are going on for that green space that's very close to the Parks admin building. So we might choose to keep that as a city building and repurpose it. Maybe, an outdoor ice skating rink is something that's being discussed. Maybe we would choose to have it as a warming house and rental area. So that remains to be seen too. In terms of the other buildings, we have over 600,000 square feet of office space, and I know that because I have people that clean it and take care of it. We do need to be in multiple buildings, in multiple locations. Fire stations, obviously, libraries, things like that need to be in multiple locations and multiple buildings. A law enforcement center is a big, beautiful 85,000 square foot building. It needs to be its own building. So kind of the way that and certainly we've explored and talked about all of that. We own 34 buildings. That includes everything from the pavilion to the Orpheum and all these other things. And we're going to need to continue to have those buildings and have them exist as they are. Those 2 buildings that I mentioned to you, though, because that staff may be moving to this new location, we might choose to sell those. That's a fact.
Councilor Erickson.
Which ones of the leases that we'll be getting rid of, though? I think that was, what's the cost saving? What's the number? What's the golden ticket, if you will, saying, based on these leases that we're giving up, we are going to be saving,
right,
fill in the blank. What is that number?
Right now, we are moving out of the 114 South Main. That is a building we've been leasing for the last 18 months or so as we've been renovating City Hall. So that lease is expiring at the end of this month. The other one is the 100 South Dakota Avenue. It's the building that's to the south of City Hall. And it's about a 7,700 square foot building, currently housing our attorneys, community development and human relations. We are paying approximately $115,000 per year for that leased space. We have a 3-year contract with them with up to 2 additional 1-year extensions that would get us through 2018 as it stands right now. And there is an incremental cost increase each year, I believe 2%, that would be for the next year and the next year.
Any other questions from the council?
I have one follow-up, I'm sorry.
Councilor Erickson, please continue.
Writing my notes, I'm sorry. The last question I have is on the same history of city government space needs, where it says 2012 space needs study, the 5-year plan. When was council brought in? Was there counselors on it back in 2012, or what does that look like?
I remember coming before you at Councilor Jameson's request to talk to you about the fact that we were doing a space needs study formally. We were engaging in a contract with an architectural firm to do that study. I don't believe that counselors necessarily were involved in question and answer type thing. It was internal staff along with the architectural firm that conducted that study.
So at the April timeframe when counselors here were brought on, what was the intent of that, I guess? Because it sounds as if the study was pretty well done. So I don't know if that was just follow-up or what.
The 2012 study was intended to be a 3 to 5 year interim fix, if you will, because we knew we were out of space and we needed to do something to address our immediate needs in the short term. So that study helped us figure out, as we vetted through various options then,
Right.
to figure out what we needed to do for the short term. But it did not address our long-term needs. And that's where we just kept going and going and going in terms of looking at more and more properties to see what would be the solution for our long-term needs. So when we came before you in April, it was to present the fact that, you know, we've been conducting this analysis with internal staff for the last, you know, several months, although really it started in 2012. And we wanted to let you know that we had decided that this was our recommended solution, was to build another building close to City Hall to help us with our office space needs.
And I understand it's something that you're constantly looking at as things move and change. I get that. I just was trying to understand the timeline a little better.
Sure.
Okay, thank you.
Councilor Karski.
No question, but maybe for discussion amongst our council members. I'm really looking at this saying, okay, we're given one choice. Yes or no, this is it. This is the location. Do you guys want it? We really don't have the ability to look at, two locations. What are the two best choices? We did that with the event center, and it caused a lot of discussion and debate between us and in the community. Sometimes when you're only given one choice, it kind of gives us gives the public the impression that we're the rubber stamp to make this happen. Either we agree with it and we're progressive and we're going to take care of the city's problems for the next 100 years, or we don't. Go back to the drawing board. We really don't have two choices or more than one choice to look at. And I would think that we'd want to explore more than one option. Just to say, this is it, you guys control the purse strings, you decide, is it what we should do or not? It just doesn't feel good to me.
Okay. Councilor Erickson?
One tiny statement to follow up on, kind of piggyback off what Councilor Karski said is, you know, in our CIP book, we're often told that this is a plan and that it can change. And we've seen that with particular items that might be of interest to some of us, not this maybe, other items, and all of a sudden they're gone out of our plan, or all of a sudden they're catapulted to the front. And this is an example too, that there's $250,000 in 2016. What about 17, 18, 19, 20? Clearly, based on what we're hearing, they kind of need to be done sooner than later. So the next plan is going to have big bucks in here. It's going to cost big dollars to have that. It's not going to be 2021. It's just a plan and a guideline for us to kind of go by, and really we're voting on 2016. So I just throw that out there for conversation piece amongst yourself as you're going into the next meeting, that it's zero in 2017, 18, 19, and 20. And that's hard pill to swallow at times.
I'll let Tracy Turback reply to that before we have any other conversation yet.
Thank you. Yeah, because we don't know the cost of the project, if we knew today, if schematic design process had been finished in April, and we knew that cost, those dollars would be in the plan along with the bond financing that would be proposed, similar to what we're doing or what the plan looks like for the downtown parking ramp. You see an estimated cost, you see the bond financing. That's not the case here. What is in the plan beyond 2016 are the dollars required to service the anticipated debt that would come along with the bond issue. So there are dollars in 17 and 18 and 19 and 20 $1 million a year to make payments on those bonds. So we are anticipating at least accounting for those dollars in the plan.
Any other replies or comments on this at this time? Councilor Irfenbach?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I was just thinking this, and Councilor Rolfing was too, apparently, where Counselor Karski's concerns are spot on, I think, in terms of the fact that administration kind of looked at all of those places. They looked at way more than one. They did look at a lot of numbers. They did go through and cross things off their list, and we weren't part of that process. I don't think that should stop this process. I think that we probably need to just see those. We need to have yet another kind of conversation about this building going forward. I don't think that because we are approving the budget tonight, that says, okay, it's going there and we don't have any more to say about it. I don't feel that way at all. But I do think that as part of the conversation moves forward, that there's no reason why staff can't come to us with the same kind of presentation and say, okay, here's why we said Rolfing had it all wrong on the parking ramp, right? Here's why we thought, that the one over on the hill was wrong. Here's why we thought this was wrong. This is why this works, and here are the numbers, here are the this, here's the that. And I don't think there's any reason why we couldn't do that. And I'm getting nodding from staff, and I guess I don't disagree with you, Councilor Karski, but I really am concerned about this project being hung up on our little kind of ego things that we're concerned we didn't hear this or we didn't hear that. So that's my statement.
Councilor Kiley.
And again, I would point out that there were other options that had been considered. And I agree, if there's additional information that members of this council feels that they need, then that is something that city staff can provide for them at that time. But because you were not privy to the information that Councilors Anderson, Rolfing, and myself were once we were brought on to the space needs conversation. So I guess I would encourage you to continue to ask questions, but to support this as it needs to be supported here this evening.
Councilor Jameson.
I'll just ask a question. How many meetings did you, the councilors who were with this, how many have you had regarding this building? Yeah.
I'll bet our crack, project manager will be able to tell us what, 3, 4? Three? Yes, we were brought in when a lot of the preliminary work, I'll say, was done. And so we looked at, and that was given to us. And so, to see some of those other numbers would be a good thing for all of us, I think, and help us better determine how we're going to go in the long run.
And I would add that I've been involved in several additional meetings because I've been involved in the review of the proposals for the architect, and as well as the review of the proposals for the construction manager at risk, and then the actual selection and interview, and will be involved in the interviewing process with construction manager at risk. So I have been involved in several meetings outside the other group.
I was just going to mention, Councilor Karski, in terms of the other properties that were considered, I went through today to count them up. I knew that there were certainly more than a dozen, probably less than 30, but I have all the addresses here of the 22 properties that were considered, and I can give you additional information in terms of why each one really didn't fit our needs. In many cases, it was because the building was simply too small. DM&E building, for example, we looked at that, certainly would need renovation, of course, to get it up to snuff, but simply not big enough to accommodate needs for 20, 25 years plus. And, parking was a concern there, and in many instances, the location was further away from the downtown campus, and but I would be happy to provide more information to you on this list.
Councilman Karski.
If I may, I don't want myself, and I don't think we have to look at 30 options as a city council, everything that was looked at or might be looked at. But at the same time, like I said, having just one option and with really no public debate other than an up or down on this one option is where I'm thinking that we could have more public discussion and more input. And I'm just looking at, give me 2, maybe 3, but just one, just for an up or down, I don't feel like I've done my due diligence, and I appreciate the work that Councilors Rolfing and Kiley and Anderson Jr. did. I truly do, but at the same time, that's not the public part of what goes on, and I think the public part of what needs to happen should be with us talking about it.
I'd like to also make a comment. just discussing the area that was selected and the businesses that are down there. You know, we take a look at that. The city owns that, the property there. That is one of the things that did stand out. You know, 2008, 2009 in the presentation, they listed several locations that they looked at. Each location actually eliminated itself. The closest one I thought was that would have been the best one was the First Dakota National Bank, which was right there on 9th and Main. And I know that the city did their due diligence on really taking a look at that building because of the size and the location. Unfortunately, that did not work out. But the location that was selected, and then we talk about the businesses or a business that is down there, I'd say let's remember over the last 20 or 30 years in that area of downtown, it's changed greatly. And businesses have come and gone down there. Where our parking ramp is, there used to be a business there that I remember the city wanted that business gone. And when it did leave, the city purchased that property to make sure that whatever was developed there was what they wanted to see. The one business that is still down there, that business has been down there for 30 plus years, and it hasn't been a business that has caused a lot of law enforcement calls or community outrage. But when we look at developing, who else is going to develop down there if we walk away for those reasons? And if we do develop down there, how much more are we going to encourage for development to happen down there in those open areas? We also have a park down there that we've had issues with also. And we're looking at developing that park so that it's more shared and it would be used more by the people who work and live down in that area. So I hope that, you know, we take a look at these things and we realize that the administration, you know, I've had questions about this myself, and through the meetings I believe they've been answered. But I do believe the administration has done their due diligence. You know, not all the time can we be involved in the beginning sections of these kind of studies, but I thought that they brought Councilor Kiley, Councilor Rolfing, and I in at a time where they wanted to discuss the building of a building and then bring that to the council. I apologize if it's been at a late time that we got this study presented to us, and I'll take that you know, criticism here. But I believe it is something that we needed to hear before we voted on it, and I believe it is something that I really hope we support and move forward with. So thank you. Is there any other questions, statements? Okay.
Chairman, I would move that we move into executive session pursuant to personnel matters pursuant to South Dakota Codified Law 1-25-21.
Need a second, please?
Second.
All right. I'll have to ask everyone to please leave as we go into executive session. The informational will end when the executive session is over. Thank you.